Princess Peach is one of the most recognizable female characters in gaming, appearing in every single Mario game since the very first NES game. However, despite her being around for about 40 years, she only starred in her own game once, which was in 2005 with the Nintendo DS game called Super Princess Peach. This was a nice and simple little platformer for the console, where Peach uses her emotions to solve certain puzzles and try to save her friends from Bowser, which I already made a video on not too long ago. The only big criticism I have for the game is that it's a bit too easy, and I did not like how it was required to 100% the game to get to the final boss, and they only told you at the last minute. But there was interesting potential for a new spin-off series, similar to what they did with Luigi, Wario, and Yoshi. But after this game, Peach pretty much got relegated back to her damsel in distress role for the most part, when during the Switch era they kinda slowly started to retire that trope. The last time that Peach became a damsel in distress, besides the Paper Mario games, was in Super Mario Odyssey that released nearly 7 years ago. Christ, it's been that long already. But after a decade of Nintendo being overly safe from Mario during the Wii U era, they decided to have a bit more of a shift during the Switch era, where they try to be a bit more experimental with Mario. Whether it's trying to bring back old concepts that people love, or trying new genres like with the Mario and Rabbids games. But I think the big shift for Mario especially started during 2023 with the release of the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Now, Mario was already a big name when it comes to gaming, but to see him having a big movie that became one of the biggest anime movies of all time, even rivaling stuff like the Disney movies, is honestly very insane. And of course, Nintendo was definitely capitalizing on that fact because between June and September, they announced 6 Mario games. Now granted, 4 of them are remakes / remasters, but it's still very crazy that they announced 6 projects for Mario. And after the massive bombshell, which was the Super Mario RPG remake, Nintendo then just casually announced a new game that stars Peach. They didn't really show much of it, hell they didn't even show the title until September, but it was kind of promising. Plus it kind of makes sense to give Peach a game right now considering the hype of the movie because she was a big part of it. But I didn't really know why, but there was just something that wasn't really clicking with me with this game. Like, it showed very solid for the most part, but I didn't really get the concept, like what is the gameplay like. But a few weeks before the game released, Nintendo released a demo for it, and after playing through it, I've gotta say, I was kind of impressed. Now granted, it wasn't really anything too mind-blowing, it was still pretty much on the easy side, but I did like the presentation and the idea of everything being a theater play. And after playing for it for 5 minutes, I then realized who were the developers for the game, which so happens to be Goodfeel. Now this studio worked for Nintendo for many years now, with their first ever big outing being Wario Land Shake It for the Wii. And after that game, they tackled other Nintendo games like Kirby's Epic Yarn, and even created the 2 Yoshi games for the Nintendo Switch and Wii U. Oh god, I really want to talk about these 2 games. So yeah, this is going to be my first ever video with a Goodfeel game, so I'm very excited to talk about this, as I've been pretty much a big fan of their work ever since 2008. So with everything out of the way, let's get started. The game starts with Princess Peach walking outside, where a toad comes by her to show her a flyer for the Sparkle Theater. Peach and some toads arrive at the theater in no time. However, once they were able to get their tickets, a mysterious witch appears where they kick everyone out, even the toads, leaving Peach behind. Not knowing what to do, a mysterious little creature appears called Stella, who so happens to be the guardian of the theater. She explains that the mysterious witch that Peach encountered was called Madame Grape, and she holds an army called the Sour Bunch. She's trying to take over the entire theater, causing the employees there in grave danger. And so, it's up to Peach to try and defeat Madame Grape and try to save the entire theater by becoming the star of each show. The story is very simple, but honestly makes sense because again, this is a Nintendo game. But I gotta say, I really do love the concept of Peach going into each of the theater shows and try to be an actor. Because since this is all just a play, you can do a lot of creative freedom with the concept. And boy, they really went full in with the theater concept, as there's a great amount of variety of type of theater plays you're going to be going through. And that leads to us to the gameplay. Now this was the biggest question I had throughout the entirety of this game's hype, which was, what is the gameplay like? Because they showed a lot of different styles of gameplay throughout. But after playing through the game, I finally figured out what it is, which is pretty much a very simple 3D platformer. And I'm not talking about something like Super Mario 64 or Crash Bandicoot, but I'm more thinking about something like Pac-Man World in a way, where in that game, the level design is pretty much a side-scroller, but with a 3D movement. And it honestly fits really well for Showtime, considering the fact that you're literally on a stage play. And as for the controls, Peach has only 2 buttons, one which is just a simple jump, and the other one to use this magical ribbon. This ribbon you use to interact with the environment or attack enemies with. Peach can also do this small spin attack like Crash Bandicoot if she jumps in the air. Now throughout the levels, you'll find yourself collecting coins and these special crystal things called the Sparkle Gems. And I freaking kid you not, the moment I collected the very first one and saw that tally of the first level, I immediately thought, yep, this is a good field game, because for some reason Nintendo didn't really tell us what developer made this game. And some of these collectibles can be devilishly hidden. I would not be surprised if you be going throughout the level, and then suddenly you find yourself with a Sparkle Gem, only to realize you missed one going back. And honestly, I really like this. Now, it could be a bit annoying, especially because in certain areas you can't backtrack at all, but for what it is, I really love how it encourages you to try and interact with everything possible around the stages. Especially when you go to the main attraction of the level, which are the transformations. As there are 10 theaters you could go through that have each 3 levels, giving you about 30 levels to explore. And with the 10 transformations, they will have different gameplay attributes for Peach to go through. The first one we have here is the Swords Fire, and as the name shows, Peach becomes a bit of a musketeer where she uses a sword to go through the battle. And it kind of turns into a bit of a hack and slash as you try to go through the hordes of enemies throughout. However, certain enemies will have armor, so in order to do so, you need to dodge it by timing your buttons just right. Honestly, these levels were pretty fun. It was definitely a good first impression. And as for the second one, we have Ninja Peach. Now this is another really fun one. I really like how you sneak around the areas and try to not get caught. You can jump on walls and even run on walls, going up top of the roofs and such. And my favorite part of these areas are probably the auto runners because they can be very fun to go through, especially when you're trying to get all the collectibles. Especially in the final area where they go really insane with the choreography. Patisserie Peach, I think I named that correctly. These levels I'm a bit more about because these are more minigame collections, or should I just say 2 minigames. The first one is basically you trying to bake as much cookies as you can possible, and the second one is a simple matching game that honestly fits in something like Mario Party. You know, when the demo released, they only had 2 of the theater plays in the game, and one of them was this, and honestly I don't feel like this was a good representation of the game. As even though I do think the minigames are fun, I do feel like it does lack in variety, especially considering the fact that the 2 ones I mentioned are the only ones you'll be playing through. These are still a pretty good time, but they could be a bit too simple for your taste. Heh, get it? Taste? Because you're in a But after you head out of the kitchen, you have Cowgirl Peach. Now this one, as you expect, you're in the Wild West. Yeehaw! Her main weapon is a special lasso that she can use to grab onto certain objects so she can fling on people or interact with the background. There's also these cool little sections where you're riding a horse down the west, that way you can chase some bad guys around, and you can even use the rope to attack them. Now for the next section we have Detective Peach. Now these levels are a bit more slow paced as they're focused on more puzzle based rather than combat or platforming, as Peach needs to look around the environments to check for clues and find the real culprit. But if this is not really your type, you can also be a thief in the game, where Peach can sneak on roofs and such Sly Cooper style, as she uses her trusty grappling hook to sneak around the areas to avoid the security and hack into the computers. This is also when the game gets the most platformer heavy, and I really like it. And as for the 7th one, we have Figure Skater Peach. Now this one is another kind of minigame collection, but I feel like this is a bit more engaging than the Patisserie one, as you're trying to skate around the area, trying to give on a good show, while timing your jumps just right by going under these icons, and it could even get a bit more platforming heavy in the later parts, which is always nice. There's even a couple of cool bosses in the game where you're trying to steal this guy's synchronized skaters. Alright, we're almost done. So for the 8th one, we have Kung Fu Peach. You know, I was very surprised how late in the game you get this thing because it was in the promotion art and even on the box art. But even still, I think this is one of the best ones in the game. Similar to the Sword Fighter, it's a lot more combat based as you have to duke out a bunch of enemies. Not only that, but there's also these little sequences where you have to duke it out with this Kung Fu Master. With these, you have to time your attacks just right because you can't just button mash your way through these bosses. It definitely kicked my butt in the final area, especially considering that you have to time it just right, and my timing was a bit off. But as we head out of the dojo and head to the water, this is when we have the Mermaid Peach. Now for these, you kind of have similar control style to Knights where you can just fly around and such, or in this case, swim around. But the main thing you're going to be doing is controlling a bunch of fish to interact with the backgrounds. Ending things off with a concert play, and I'll be completely honest, when I first saw this in the trailer, I immediately got war flashbacks of Kingdom Hearts 2. God damn, I hate the Little Mermaid levels. But anyway, so for the final form that we can have is Mighty Peach. With this, she transforms into some sort of superhero, where she has super strength where she can carry a giant truck around and throw giant objects. Where you're trying to stop an alien invasion by literally punching the UFOs off the planet. So yeah, these are the forms you can see throughout the game, and overall, they are honestly pretty fun. A lot of these do change the gameplay somewhat, but they still play the same mostly, with the exception being the pastry one, which is basically trying to get to point A to point B, while finding the various collectibles or saving the employees. I also like how they implement a taunt in the game, and unlike these where it's just like cosmetic, these actually use a purpose because if you taunt in certain areas, it'll unlock a certain secret. A lot of these are pretty much where you can find the special sparkle gem, although some of them just hold coins. Lots and lots of coins, although luckily there's actually a purpose of the coins and they're just not collectibles for the sake of it. Which is that there's actually a shop in this game where you can actually dress up Peach in certain patterns and such. In fact, earlier ago I mentioned there's a ribbon you can find throughout the levels, and these are also cosmetic items. I didn't really use them at all, but it's really cool to see Nintendo doing more cosmetic stuff like this. And as for the purpose of the sparkle gems, well, if you complete each level with all of them, you get a little scrapbook. But most importantly, they're used to unlock bosses in the game. Although for the bosses themselves, they're pretty much on the easy side. Not really need to talk about, they're pretty much the simple 3-hit kill you would expect from a Nintendo game. Although for the fourth boss, I did have a bit of a challenge because of how difficult it is to reflect his projectiles at him. But I do have to admit, I do really love the design for the bosses, they all look really cool. And that leads me to the presentation of this game. So one of the strongest aspects of a good field game is their strong presentation, and Princess Peach Showtime is no exception. From the amazing yarn aesthetic from Yoshi's Woolly World to the amazing theater aesthetic, this game looks very good and really nails the theater theming really well. I like how some of the mini-bosses in the game you would find in each of the world are pretty much just puppets that are strung together, really nailing the fact that this is really just a big theater play. And it's honestly impressive, despite how much this Switch is aging in hardware-wise, they're still able to pump out really looking games with this because of its strong art style. Although despite the amazing visual style this game has, I do have one big problem with it, which so happens to be surprisingly the resolution and frame rate. Okay, so personally, if it's like a GameCube game, I don't really care if the game's in low resolution. In fact, I usually sometimes play games in low resolution on GameCube. But the difference is that that's from a console that came out 20 years ago, while Princess Peach Showtime is a game that came out in 2024. And just like Yoshi's Crafted World, the game just looks a bit too blurry at times. But it doesn't get too distracting because you eventually get used to it. But going on for a bit more of a positive look, so Samantha Kelly, who has been the voice actress for Peach since 2007, she usually does a pretty good job voicing the character, but I've got to say, this game has to be her best performance yet as the character because how much of a range she gave the character this time. I know people are a bit confused of the voice direction they gave Peach this time. It honestly weirdly reminded me of Sonic Frontiers in a way. But the more you play it, the more you get the voice direction that we're going to go for because not only Peach plays on a different show, but also she has a different voice for it. Which honestly makes sense because if you're going for a more Western theme, you would want to have more of a Western accent to it. But not to say that her old voice is gone, because there are some theater plays where she does go for her original voice, like with the bakery one and the figure skating one. And as for the soundtrack of this game, it is also really good. Which is honestly kind of funny to think about, because with their last Nintendo game, they pretty much dropped the ball when it comes to the soundtrack in Yoshi's Crafted World, as the quality between the soundtracks is night and day, especially during the final parts of the game. Alright, so I really want to talk about the final parts of the game, but since this game is only 2 weeks old, I'm just going to leave a massive spoiler warning right here. If you do not want to see spoilers, click the time frame right here or just stop watching the video. Here's a video of my cat so you can avoid spoilers for a quick second, so you can skip it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright, so after you finish the 5th world of the game, you then have to go all the way to the basement to save all the performers. After doing the 10 final stages to save all the performers for one final time, they thank Peach by giving her a special ability to stop Madame Grape. This is when Peach literally goes Super Saiyan and becomes Gradient Peach, and now time for the final battle. Now as for the boss fight itself, it's pretty much on the easy side as you need to dodge her attacks while trying to shoot her with projectiles. But it does ramp up in difficulty when you try to dodge these super fast trains that are coming by. But the crazy factor of this boss really ramps up when you defeat Phase 1. As Madame Grape has one final trick up her sleeve and grows super giant and destroys the entire theater, leaving it into rumble. And when all seems lost, Peach then turns into a much more powerful Saiyan form called Super Gradient Peach, who literally looks like a superfied Rosalina. And I kid you not, the moment that the boss fight comes in, I thought for a split sec this is going to be a Titan boss from Sonic. That is 3 Sonic Frontiers reference I did in this video. That's probably a new record. But anyway, so you're just blasting away, trying to dodge projectiles, and then Peach does the final blow, defeating Madame Grape. The day is saved, although the theater is in complete shambles, but luckily Peach is here to fix it. And that was Princess Peach Showtime, and overall, it was honestly a surprisingly good time. I'll be honest, for the longest time when this game was first announced, I was a bit on the hesitation side, but I came out pleasantly surprised. This is not going to be a game that's going to blow your mind or anything, it's still a somewhat 7 out of 10 game, but even still, I think this is a pretty good time and I recommend trying it. It's definitely a nice game to relax to. And not only that, but also out of all the Mario games that are released on Nintendo Switch, this one feels like it was plucked straight out of the GameCube era in some ways. And I hope Nintendo and Goodfield tries to do more stuff like this, because this could be really cool for the series. But for the next video, I did a little community poll a few days ago, and it looks like Sonic Heroes won. So the next time we'll be here, we'll be going to talk about that game. I have a lot of things to say about it since I grew up with it. But that'll do for today, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye!